The following episode features a historic article from the Nebraska History Magazine. This article may reflect the language and attitudes of its time, and while it offers valuable insight into the past, may contain expressions or viewpoints that are outdated or offensive by today's standards. Any outdated terms do not reflect the current views or perspectives of the Nebraska State Historical Society. Welcome to the Nebraska History Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Goforth. Each episode, we explore articles written and published in Nebraska History Magazine. Many Christmas activities and unique holiday customs developed in Omaha beginning in the 1850s. Beautiful downtown store window displays had disappeared by 1980, but a strong tradition of charitable work had endured for more than a century. Today, we revisit the history of the holiday season in Omaha in the 1987 article, Sales, Santa, and Goodfellows, Celebrating Christmas in Omaha, written by Tommy Thompson. Omaha was a small city of less than 2,000 people in the 1850s. As the capital of Nebraska Territory and a major outfitting point for gold seekers and freighting firms, the community grew quickly. Yet, amid rapid change, Omahans continued traditional Christmas activities and developed unique holiday customs that have survived for more than a century. In the 1850s and 1860s, the Christmas season was a busy and festive time in Omaha. About 2 weeks before Christmas, local merchants arranged attractive displays of toys and fancy goods in their windows and advertised their wares in small newspaper ads. Many Christmas shoppers found gifts at ladies' church bazaars. During the last third of the 19th century, holiday activities became more elaborate and sophisticated as Omaha grew to be Nebraska's largest city and industrial center. The commercial aspects of Christmas became more pronounced, although merchants generally refrained from advertising holiday wares until after Thanksgiving. Most began holiday advertising the first Sunday after Thanksgiving. A few stores waited until a week or so after that date. Occasionally, a merchant opened the Christmas season as early as the middle of November, but such instances were rare. Newspaper advertisements remained small and plain until the late 1880s when some stores began using ads that ran one half page to perhaps a full page or more. Ads also became more appealing, with drawings of toys and other merchandise designed to pique the interest of Christmas shoppers. Merchants tried to draw customers into their stores by other means as well. Customers who purchased a certain number of items or items of a prescribed value would receive a free gift from some merchants. In the mid-1880s, L.O. Jones and Company offered shoppers a free coffee lunch all day December 18th. The sale was also an enticement to customers. Frugal citizens could wait for the Christmas closing sale, which became fairly common during the 4 or 5 days before Christmas. Many parents must have rushed to Hayden Brothers just before Christmas in 1890 to buy a pair of Acme Steel Runner ice skates for 45 cents, regularly priced at $1.25. Some merchants preferred a post-Christmas sale. One practical businessman advertised his Christmas wares at 20% discount effective December 27th with the suggestion that the merchandise would make good New Year's gifts. Extended hours were another approach. As early as December 1st, merchants notified customers that their stores would remain open evenings until Christmas. The owner of the Boston store in 1895 announced that his store would be open until 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and some stores even remained open on Christmas Day. While advertising, sales, and longer hours were effective appeals to customers, merchants also tried to create a festive Christmas spirit by using elaborate decorations in their establishments. Evergreen garlands and holly were common, but merchants also focused on the display of their wares. A reporter for the Omaha Daily Herald in 1883 wrote that James Bonner's home furnishing store glittered inside like a palace. Glistening crystal, polished silver, delicate china, and other treasures glowed under the light from electric lamps, which had arrived in the city only a few months before. Even more impressive were the window displays. Merchants competed to arrange the most attractive displays, and shoppers looked forward to these annual holiday scenes, gathering around the windows to await the official unveiling. Then, suddenly, before them was a winter landscape with Santa Claus and his sleigh, a country scene complete with a log cabin, real trees, a pond, and animals playing on cotton snow, or children asleep in bed next to a lovely tree draped with presents. Some stores changed their windows 2 or 3 times before Christmas. The advent of electrical lighting in the early 1880s made the displays even more fabulous. Tremendous crowds viewed the Christmas windows from morning until night, and many children retained fond memories of them for years. Even the beautiful window displays could not capture the attention of young people like the magical figure of Santa Claus. Gradually, Santa became a regular Christmas attraction at Omaha department stores. By the 1880s, his arrival marked the opening of the shopping season. Hayden Brothers drew tremendous crowds with an annual Christmas parade, and hundreds of Omaha children lined the street to watch Santa ride past on a Hayden delivery wagon. Other wagons followed, displaying holiday items from various departments of the store, although the children probably paid little attention since they were scrambling for the candy that was thrown by Santa. As the Omaha World Herald noted, in 1890, the arrival of Santa at Hayden's was always a dazzling hit. Between 1900 and 1920, merchants continued the custom of waiting until after Thanksgiving to open the Christmas season. Occasionally, a business began its Christmas advertising in mid-November, but most stores stressed Thanksgiving sales during much of the month. Toylands opened, and Santa arrived in stores during the second week of December. For example, J.L. Brandeis & Sons, Boston store, in its World Herald ad of Sunday, December 3rd, 1905, urged readers to start their Christmas shopping the following day and announced that Brandeis Toyland would be open on December 9th. However, there was a tendency even then to encourage Omahans to do their Christmas shopping somewhat earlier than in the past. The Omaha Daily News reported on December 12, 1900, that Christmas shopping had started early, while a decade later, the World Herald reminded readers on November 20th that thrifty buyers would be doing their shopping early. In 1911, merchants displayed toys earlier than ever before. The Commercial Club, the Chamber of Commerce in 1912, reported that merchants in some cities were resisting the trend towards beginning the Christmas season in November, but the club felt that an early start would relieve congestion in the stores and ensure delivery of Christmas packages in time for the holiday. Newspapers such as the World Herald continued to endorse the concept. In 1917, the World Herald urged readers on November 22nd to, quote, get in line, be an early Christmas shopper, end quote. This trend towards an earlier beginning of the Christmas season continued in the 1920s and 30s, and by 1941, the Brandeis Toyland opened on November 22nd. In the 1920s, the perception that Christmas shopping was beginning earlier each year helped provoke some reaction by a few prominent Omaha citizens, although most comments came from religious leaders. Critics stressed the over-commercialization of Christmas. To them, Christmas had lost its original meaning. The World Herald responded in an editorial that materialism, as exhibited in the purchasing of gifts, really reflected the true Christmas because, quote, the spirit of Christmas is the spirit of unselfish sacrifice for others, end quote. In 1930, the Reverend J.W. Kirkpatrick concluded that the commercial aspects of Christmas would continue, and it was up to the people to remember the real purpose of the holiday. By the 1930s, there was little evidence of any public concern about Christmas having becoming too commercialized, probably because merchants continued to refrain from promoting the holiday earlier than the third week in November, and because the changes observed during the previous decade had now become more accepted. Techniques used to attract customers to the stores were similar to those used in the 19th century. The half-price sale and closing out sale usually occurred 2 or 3 days before Christmas, followed by ads starting December 24th or 25th for the after-Christmas sale, the year-end clearance sale, the clean sweep sale, and eventually the white sale. Bargains could be found, especially in toys, if the shopper was willing to wait until the last minute to purchase gifts. Merchants also continued the practice of extending store hours for the convenience of shoppers. From about 1900 until the late 1920s, most Omaha businesses that belonged to the Associated Retailers Association remained open until 9 or 10 in the evening, 6 days a week, starting in mid-December. In the 1930s, longer hours became the rule, starting the second week of the month. During World War II, some merchants extended their hours as early as December 1st, though the longer hours applied only 1 or 2 evenings a week. Stores also tended to remain open until 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Free gifts to attract shoppers was another merchandising method carried over from the past. In 1908, the People's Store offered one of the most amazing gifts of the time. Everyone who bought merchandise worth $10 or more received a trimmed Christmas tree, which included candles, holly, 12 oranges, 2 pounds of candy, a toy horn, and one fancy toy. In 1922, the Union Outfitting Company gave away over 50 items, including a child's pedal-powered Pierce Arrow sedan and a Pennsylvania Flyer electric train. A few years later, J.L. Brandeis & Sons gave away 3 children's auto-powered by gasoline engines. In a more practical vein, the Union Outfitting Company annually presented a free turkey to each customer who purchased goods of a certain value. By 1937, this tradition had endured for 50 years with the exception of 1927, when the store had a supply of geese instead of turkeys. The toy department was still the major attraction for many prospective buyers. Described variously as a fairyland, a glittering palace of beauty, or a paradise for the kiddies, the toy departments became grander year by year. Symbolically, J.L. Brandeis & Sons began the 20th century with its Toyland in the basement, and by the 1920s had elevated it to the 8th floor, where there were 75 salespersons to serve customers. Santa could be found in many toy departments, and sometimes he did more than just listen to children's Christmas wishes. The Santa at Hayden Brothers one Christmas was described as, quote, an expert pianist, a splendid singer, and a crack-a-jack on the mandolin and violin, end quote. In 1907, the Bennett Company had a teddy bear circus, but J.L. Brandeis seemed to do more than any other store. In 1908, the Brandeis Toyland offered a Doll's Ball of All Nations, a moving picture show, and an auxetophone, or phonograph concert. During the 1920s and 30s, the store featured a circus with ponies and acrobatic dogs. Between 1900 and World War II, merchants continued to adorn their stores with attractive displays. Besides interior decorations, window displays remained one of the most appealing aspects of Christmas in Omaha. Parents and children eagerly awaited the unveiling of windows to view the collection of mechanical nursery story characters or dolls waltzing at a country club. Eventually, the Brandeis store decorated all of its front windows along 16th Street in a continuous theme. By the 1920s, there were contests sponsored by the city's newspapers and the Associated Retailers Association to determine the most beautiful animated display. In the first such competition, held in 1920, the Daily News awarded a silver cup to the winner, J.L. Brandeis & Sons. Some stores placed decorations outside. The Burgess Nash Company often put as many as 28 trees decorated with about 1,000 red and green lights along 16th and Harney Streets. In 1924, merchants who were members of the Associated Retailers Association began to line streets in the business district with as many as 250 lighted trees. The decorating of downtown streets continued until World War II forced its suspension in 1942. Merchants continued to use Santa Claus to draw shoppers to their stores. In 1927, Omaha had its first Christmas parade since the 1890s. City high school bands marched. The schools were dismissed early so students could attend. The parades and others ended with the arrival of Santa at his lodge on the courthouse lawn, where children could visit at certain hours. These parades drew crowds estimated from 25,000 to 50,000 people and undoubtedly fulfilled the merchants' desire for crowded store aisles. By 1913, Omahans could visit a city Christmas tree on the courthouse lawn. The Omaha Daily News reported that the tree was an idea copied from New York City. Several thousand people watched as the tree was lighted on Christmas Eve. During the next several years, the tree was placed in the city auditorium where candy and fruit were distributed to poor children. In 1918, the tree reappeared on the courthouse lawn, but the scheduled victory song around the tree had to be canceled due to an outbreak of influenza. However, candy, fruit, nuts, and popcorn were delivered to the homes of poor children. Festivities at the tree resumed in subsequent years, but after the early 1920s, newspapers no longer mentioned a city tree. There was a tree in the Benson section of the city at the intersection of Maple and Military Avenues. After World War II, Omaha merchants continued to inaugurate the holiday season by beginning their advertising during the second and third weeks in November. In the 1970s and 1980s, advertising on a limited scale began in early November, but the greatest volume of Christmas ads started late in the month. There seemed to be a tendency after 1970 to move forward the date for the opening of stores' Toylands. Most Toylands continued to open the middle of November. Some began operating by the first week of the month. By 1981, the World Herald noted that a few businesses had installed Christmas displays in October or even in September. Merchants after 1945 tried to revive the use of decorations to attract customers, a practice largely abandoned during the war years. Some street decorations appeared again in 1947, and the first lighted displays in post-war Omaha went up in 1949. Even though the decorations often were installed a week or so before Thanksgiving, the lights usually were not turned on until the day afterwards. Occasionally, there was a parade with Santa, and in 1951, a reported 50,000 people viewed his arrival in Omaha. The greatest holiday attraction continued to be the old tradition of unveiling the decorated store windows. In 1949, 30 stores participated in the World Herald's Night of Beautiful Christmas Windows contest. Until 1972, the Brandeis department store placed a mechanical display in its main window at 16th and Douglas and used its unveiling to signal the beginning of the Christmas season. The lengthening of store hours in the post-war era undoubtedly helped revive criticism of the commercial aspects of Christmas. Just after the war, stores generally were open only Monday and Thursday evenings for the convenience of shoppers. By the late 1950s, they were staying open evenings Monday through Friday, beginning in early December. In the 1960s, some businesses, especially discount and shopping center stores, inaugurated Saturday evening hours. By the mid-1960s, stores crossed the Sunday closing barrier. Discount stores again led the way by opening on Sunday in late November or early December. A more conservative approach was taken by businesses such as the Nebraska, which opened only one Sunday in December. Many Omaha stores soon adopted the policy of opening on Sunday during the Christmas season and then permanently. The Brandeis Corporation claimed that it was forced to remain open on Sundays because of competition from discount stores. When the stores did begin opening on Sundays for Christmas shopping, they attracted large crowds. The old concerns about the commercialization of Christmas had resurfaced after World War II, years before Sunday opening had become an issue. In 1947, the Reverend George Bernard of Trinity English Lutheran Church declared that, quote, commercialism is making a mockery out of Christmas, end quote. Society, said Reverend Bernard, needed a true Christmas spirit in these disturbed times. Many people felt threatened by the Cold War. In 1950, Evelyn Simpson, woman's news editor for the World Herald, summed up the fear of, quote, a world where tomorrow is uncertain. We must do our Christmas shopping early, lest tomorrow be Christmas, or Christmas never comes, end quote. Some citizens wrote to the public pulse of the World Herald to complain about early advertising and window decorations and what they considered an overemphasis on the secular side of Christmas, dances, parties, Santa Claus, Rudolph the Reindeer, and Frosty the Snowman. Omaha ministers were drawn into the debate, and they often disagreed with one another. The very Reverend Robert Hewitt of Trinity Episcopal Cathedral denied the basic message of Christmas had been lost. He argued that, quote, Christmas will always be to everyone what he puts into it, end quote. However, the Reverend R.R. Brown of the Gospel Tabernacle declared that, quote, you cannot substitute Santa Claus for Christ and come up with a spiritual atmosphere, end quote. Several other ministers polled by the World Herald agreed with Reverend Hewitt. They felt gift-giving and other activities at Christmas evoked a spirit of kindness among people. The World Herald took a similar stand in several editorials. Shopping for gifts, according to the paper, not only created a spirit, which is good, but it was a basic element of American capitalism. Businessmen did want to make profits at Christmas, but so did the manufacturers of hymn books, the World Herald reminded its readers. In 1964, an editorial by Victor Haas answered the critics who were complaining about downtown street decorations being put up in mid-November. Haas declared that the decorations served the purpose of creating a mood for gift buying and were simply a part of life. Another issue which caused controversy in Omaha after 1945 was the decision to place a crèche, or a nativity scene, in front of the courthouse. The nativity scene, erected for the first time in 1955, was purchased by the Associated Retailers Association. At first, the only complaints developed because the scene included a white horse instead of a donkey, which some citizens felt made the display inaccurate. 4 years later, the county board voted to purchase a nativity scene with tax funds. The regional director of the National Conference of Christians and Jews questioned this action, but a World Herald editorial considered the protest to be an overreaction and commented, quote, "Is any unbeliever harmed or weakened in his own faith by taking part in this Christmas celebration? We think not. We think the Muslims, the Jew, the agnostic, or the tribesman in the jungle who permits the spirit of Christmas to come into his heart will be strengthened and purified," end quote. The World Herald did suggest that all other faiths should have their views represented on the courthouse lawn if they desired. The nativity scene appeared at the courthouse every Christmas for the next 20 years, and different organizations continued to protest to no avail. In the late 1970s, the scene was damaged by a windstorm and became unusable. The United States Supreme Court ruled in 1984 that a nativity scene could appear on public property as long as it appeared with other symbols of Christmas, such as Santa Claus and Christmas trees. Downtown parades and magnificent window displays began passing from the Omaha scene by the 1970s as Omahans found suburban malls more attractive for shopping than the downtown area. In 1980, the downtown Brandeis store closed, though many memories remained associated with the building. No longer could children go to the 10th floor to see the Fairyland Castle, Duke the Dancing Pony, the Schoonover Dog Act, or Willy Wonka Land. Christmas had moved to the malls, but it would never be the same. Shopping center stores generally did not even hire their own Santas because it was cheaper to hire one Santa to serve the entire mall area. Despite the hustle and bustle of Christmas shopping, parades, and family activities, Omahans historically have remembered the needs of less fortunate members of the community. As early as the Civil War years, churches in the city provided gifts for poor children. Charity work expanded with the arrival of a small group of Sisters of Mercy nuns on the steamboat Montana in the fall of 1864. Soon the sisters were providing dinner and gifts of clothing for the poor on Christmas Day. By the late 1860s, other Omaha women organized a relief society to help poor widows and children during the holidays. This spirit of sharing was one of the richest and most persistent Christmas traditions established during Omaha's first decades. The children at the Convent of Mercy orphanage, run by the Sisters of Mercy, would have had little Christmas cheer if the people had not aided them. Starting in the mid-1870s, there were also children at the Omaha City Mission on 10th Street between Dodge and Capitol, one of the poorest areas in the city. The mission, founded by the Christian Workers Association, was designed at first to provide a weekly dinner for Omaha newsboys and bootblacks. Later, it added a Sunday school for poor children in the area and a home where young women could learn to sew. Each year, by the late 1880s, the mission provided a Christmas dinner and tree with presents for 400 to 500 children. One of the major efforts to help Omaha's poor during the holiday season was led by the Omaha World Herald. In 1889, the newspaper asked for donations to a Poor Children's Christmas Fund. The result was a party for 2,000 children, complete with Christmas tree, Santa Claus, who entered in a dog cart drawn by an elephant, and presents for all. In 1890, donations provided Christmas dinner to nearly 4,000 children who also consumed over 2,000 pounds of candy. Children of all races and all ages attended the dinner and, quote, "For an hour, all of the sordid miseries of life were forgotten. For an hour, all that was sad and sorrowful in life was banished. For an hour, rich and poor, black and white, were happy in the universal kinship of Christmastide," end quote. The same year, volunteers delivered presents and additional food to 700 homes, many of them miserable shanties on the bottoms near the Missouri River. Organizers of the festivities felt that ill children and those with insufficient clothing had been unable to attend the party the previous year and had not received a gift. Even though Omahans responded with open hearts to the poor, one of the city commissioners warned 3 non-residents out of town in 1890 because it believed other communities had been sending their poor to Omaha to take advantage of the city's charitable organizations. Holiday charitable work during the first decades of the 20th century became more sophisticated. The Salvation Army and the Volunteers of America took over from the city mission much of the responsibility for feeding the poor at Christmas. Annually, the Army's kettles and the Volunteers' chimneys appeared on Omaha streets seeking donations for food baskets, at least after the Army in 1902 ended the policy of feeding the poor as a group in its hall. Each of these organizations delivered between 200 and 500 food baskets to needy persons at Christmas. The city mission, Salvation Army, and other groups such as the Junior League in the 1920s and 30s tried to provide gifts for poor children. They often had a tree and distributed shoes, clothing, candy, and perhaps a toy. One year, the city mission included a letter of encouragement for the waifs. In 1910, an estimated 5,000 poor children received gifts. Omaha newsboys, with such nicknames as Bad Luck, Skinny, Smoke, and Snakes, received from a donor, quote, a live chicken, a peck of potatoes, a quart of cranberries, 4 packages of Post Toasties, and Postum breakfast foods like apples, also cookies, oranges, coffee, and sugar, end quote. Starting in 1919 or 1920, members of the police department provided Christmas festivities for some of the poorest children in the city, those living in the 3rd Ward bounded by the Missouri River in Leavenworth, 16th and Nicholas Streets. One newspaper described these children as representing every race, creed, and color. Other charitable or civic organizations looked after children living in Omaha orphanages. The Knights of Columbus, Woodmen of the World, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, Catholic Daughters of America, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and Masonic orders were just a few of the many groups that helped provide Christmases for children at the St. James Orphanage, Crèche, Social Settlement House, Child Saving Institute, and others. Businesses like J.L. Brandeis & Sons, Hayden Brothers, and Sears, Roebuck & Company often donated toys. Annually in the 1920s, T.A. Tully of Tully's Hat Store distributed at least 100 hats to needy men. Perhaps the most systematic charitable work was carried on by the Omaha newspapers. By 1908, the Omaha Daily News started the Santa Claus Association. Over the next 15 years, the news provided a gift, candy, and fruit for 1,500 to 3,000 children annually. Private donations supported the association, and expenditures ranged from only $716 in 1913 to $2,567 in 1920. Eventually overshadowing the Daily News work was the Goodfellows campaign started by the Omaha World-Herald in 1910. That newspaper adopted the idea from the Chicago Tribune. Readers were encouraged to buy gifts for children whose names would be supplied by the paper or send money directly to the World-Herald, which would then purchase the presents. The first year, the Goodfellows helped about 900 children. Within a decade, the campaign was aiding approximately 2,000 children annually and spending from $1,500 to $2,000 in direct donations. The campaign grew in the 1920s, and at one time, 4,000 children received aid. Though the Depression caused donations to decline in the early 1930s, the program had recovered by 1939. In that year, Goodfellows contributed over $7,000, which the World-Herald used to purchase gifts and food baskets for 2,502 families. Gradually, the focus of the Goodfellows drive shifted from direct involvement by contributors, and the World-Herald assumed a greater role as chief Goodfellow, calling upon readers to furnish the money and he'll do the job. After World War II, charitable groups continued to fulfill their traditional roles. Members of the Y-Teens, Girl Scouts, and Campfire Girls often dressed dolls for the Goodfellow campaign. The Catholic Daughters of America provided toys for the St. James Orphanage, and the Marine Corps Reserve started its Toys for Tots drive in the mid-1950s. Major contributions continued to be made by the World-Herald Goodfellows and by the Salvation Army. In 1945, the Goodfellows Drive raised $6,777, and by the early 1980s, fundraising topped $100,000. Similarly, the Salvation Army began its Tree of Lights campaign in 1950 when it erected a 30-foot tree at the courthouse. The goal was to raise $25,000 and turn on a light for each $100 collected. 30 years later, the Army sought $250,000 and collected almost $275,000. Both the Salvation Army and the Goodfellows used their funds over the years to provide toys, clothing, Christmas parties, food, summer camp, glasses, and hearing aids for needy children. Though the fundraising took place during the Christmas season, the benefits were realized throughout the year. What has Christmas meant to the people of Omaha for the last 130 years? For some, its magic has been tarnished. Only older residents can remember the beauty of downtown store window displays, and critics of commercialism complain about the apparent de-emphasis of the holiday's religious character. But continuity has been more important than change. Strong traditions, such as charitable work, have continued for more than a century. The celebration of both religious and secular aspects of Christmas continue to play a major role in the life of Omaha. Thank you for listening to the Nebraska History Podcast. To learn more about Nebraska History Magazine, to listen to more podcasts, or to support our podcast by becoming a member of the Nebraska State Historical Society, go to history.nebraska.gov/podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and get notified when we release a new episode on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, from all of us at the Nebraska State Historical Society, happy holidays. I'm Chris Goforth.